Have you ever wondered how one man, at just 20 years of age, dared to challenge the most powerful empire on earth, and won? A king who never lost a single battle, who marched from Greece to the edge of India and reshaped history in just a decade. A man who believed he was touched by the gods. Some called him a liberator, others called him a tyrant. But the world would remember him as Alexander the Great. In today's documentary, we go beyond the legend. You'll witness how Alexander built the deadliest war machine of his time, how he overcame impossible odds against Persian power, and how his ambition pushed him to the very edge of the known world. We'll relive the battles of Granicus, Issus, and Gaugamela, the moments that rewrote the destiny of civilizations. And we'll uncover how a conqueror who ruled continents could not conquer time. Stay with me until the end, because what happened after his death may shock you. His empire didn't just fall, it exploded into chaos. His tomb disappeared, and even today, no one truly knows where the greatest general in history rests. If you love ancient history, warfare analysis, and untold stories of great civilizations, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of my upcoming informative videos. This isn't just history, it's the rise and fall of a legend. Let's begin.
The rise of a legend. In the rugged lands of ancient Greece, where mountains pierced the sky and city-states clashed like gods at war, a storm was forming. A storm that would one day sweep across continents, rewriting the destiny of civilizations. From around 500 BC, Greece became a cradle of brilliance. Art, philosophy, democracy, and warfare all flourished. And yet under this brilliance lay internal tensions. Athens, intellectual and democratic, thrived on naval dominance. Sparta, hardened and disciplined, built an army feared across the world. Their rivalry led to decades of devastating wars, leaving Greece fractured, exhausted, and vulnerable. They would never expect that salvation and conquest would come from the land they sneered at. In the north rose Macedonia, long dismissed as backwater and uncivilized. But under King Philip II, everything changed. Philip understood that Greece's power lay not just in philosophy or politics, but in discipline, unity, and mastery of war. He reformed his army, creating the legendary phalanx, armed with the 18-foot Sarissa spear. It was unconventional, unstoppable, a wall of death advancing across the earth. In 338 BC, at the Battle of Chaeronea, Philip crushed Athens and Thebes, uniting most of Greece under his control, the Hellenic League. His next goal, a colossal dream, to wage war against the Persian Empire, the same empire that once torched the temples of Athens, the greatest power of its age. But on the eve of his conquest, Philip was assassinated, and Greece held its breath. His successor was not a seasoned warrior, nor a wise counselor, but a boy of just 20 years old. His name was Alexander. Even before he became king, there had always been something fierce in his eyes. Tutored by the philosopher Aristotle, Alexander was trained not just in combat, but in the art of leadership and strategy. He studied Homer's Iliad like scripture, carrying it everywhere, believing that the hero Achilles spoke to him across time. When Philip died, many thought Macedonia would fracture, the empire would dissolve. But Alexander moved swiftly, like a blade in the night. He eliminated his rivals, executed potential traitors, and quelled rebellions with ruthless efficiency. Then came Thebes, a city once considered the heart of Greek strength. When Thebes revolted against him, Alexander struck with the wrath of an empire. He destroyed the city, sold its people into slavery, and left its ruins as a warning to all Greece. Message received. No one would challenge him again. At last, with Greece secured, Alexander took up his father's unfulfilled dream. In 334 BC, he led an army of 40,000 men across the Hellespont, stepping onto Asia Minor, into the lands ruled by Persia. Legend claims that when he set foot on Asian soil, he threw a spear into the land, declaring, "I accept these lands as gifts from the gods." He was not there to negotiate. He was there to conquer. Destiny had chosen him. The young king who commanded not just an army, but the fate of nations. He would reshape the world with the edge of a sword. People would call him many names: the son of Zeus, the liberator of Egypt, the scourge of Persia, Alexander the Accursed, Alexander the Great. But this was only the beginning.
Forged by war, building the Macedonian war machine. Great conquerors are not born from peace. They are forged in fire, in rivalry, in the relentless pursuit of power. And before Alexander stormed the empires of the world, a far greater force was forged: his army. After the destruction of Thebes, the flames still rising toward the skies, the rest of Greece bowed its head. Word spread like a tremor. The young king of Macedonia was not to be tested. Yet what many did not realize was that the true power behind Alexander's rise was not just his will, but the unstoppable war machine built by his father, King Philip II. In earlier centuries, warfare among Greek city-states had been fierce but rigid. Hoplite phalanxes, shield to shield, advanced in tightly packed formations, effective but limited. Philip saw in warfare not just strength but strategy. He took the traditional Greek spear and extended it into the sarissa, a monstrous 18-foot pike, twice the length of any known weapon of its kind. Held by Macedonian phalangites, these towering spears created an impenetrable wall of death. As the phalanxes advanced, the earth trembled. With every step, countless spear points pushed forward, a storm of iron. These soldiers were trained year-round, not farmers summoned for battle like other Greeks, but professional warriors. Behind them stood elite infantry, the hypastists, guarding the vulnerable flanks. Before them ran formidable skirmishers, Agrinian javelin throwers, Thracian slingers, Illyrian archers, swift as wolves, deadly from afar. And then came the weapon that made Alexander unstoppable: the companion cavalry, elite horsemen, armored and fearless, trained for shock warfare. At their head, Alexander himself, whose presence turned battle into legend. While others watched from hillsides, Alexander led the charge. When Alexander became king, he inherited not just an army, but loyalty bound by respect and awe. But Macedonia was still unstable. Rivals spoke in whispers. Rebels stirred in distant lands. Alexander responded with brutal clarity. He secured his throne with blood, executing pretenders and bringing rebellious territories to heel. The kings of Illyria and Thessaly submitted after swift campaigns. But it was the destruction of Thebes, once a mighty Greek city, that sent shockwaves across the ancient world. Alexander's message echoed through the valleys: "I will unite Greece, or burn it." Now ruler of a unified Hellenic League, Alexander turned his gaze east toward the Persian Empire, but before war could begin, he inspected his troops. Picture it: the sun setting over Macedonia's military encampment. Tens of thousands of men gathered, phalangites, their cuirasses stretching towards the horizon, cavalry squadrons glistening in bronze armor, archers lined like shadows against twilight. Silence fell. Alexander, mounted on his steed Bucephalus, rode before them. "Men of Macedonia," his voice rang out, "you were born into battle and raised for glory. My father brought Greece to her knees. I will take you beyond her borders, to the ends of the earth." A roar rose from the soldiers. They weren't fighting for Alexander, they were fighting with him. Among his commanders were men whose names would later carve history. Parmenion, the veteran strategist, cautious yet wise. Philotas, his son, leading the companion cavalry. Nicanor, the guardian of the phalanx flanks. Crateros and Perdiccas, forces of unwavering discipline. Hephaestion, Alexander's closest friend, the man he trusted most. Each one would play a part not just in victories, but also in future betrayal, tragedy, and revolution. As final preparations for the invasion began, Alexander performed a symbolic act. Standing before his men, he reached out and seized a spear. With a cry that cut across the battlefield, he hurled it towards Asia. "I claim these lands, by right of conquest." His army erupted in cheers. In that moment, Alexander was no longer simply Macedonian. He was an embodiment of ambition itself. But perhaps the most important transformation was happening not on the battlefield, but in his mind. He began to envision not just victory, but destiny. His ambition stretched beyond borders, beyond kings. He admired heroes like Achilles and sought to surpass them. He believed that greatness was not earned, it was taken. And with every soldier he trained, every weapon sharpened, every horse saddled, the world moved one step closer to being conquered. The world remembers the name of Alexander, but history was written by his army, an army forged by his father, perfected by his command, and soon unleashed on the most powerful empire on earth. The next chapter of this epic begins with a single crossing, when Alexander steps into Asia and destiny steps towards him.
Crossing into destiny, the invasion of Persia. There are moments in history when a man steps forward and the world changes forever. In the spring of 334 BC, Alexander crossed a narrow stretch of water and entered legend. The Hellespont, known today as the Dardanelles, separated Europe from Asia, a mere strait of water. But for Alexander, it wasn't just a crossing, it was the threshold between kingdoms and eternity. His father had dreamed of conquering Persia. Alexander would do it. As his army prepared to step onto foreign soil, silence fell. Alexander paused at the shoreline, gazing across the waters to Asia Minor, lands ruled by the mighty Persian Empire, an ancient superpower spanning from Egypt to India. With one powerful motion, he hurled a spear into Asian soil and declared, "I accept these lands as a gift from the gods, and I will take them for Macedonia." Thunderous cheers erupted. The invasion had begun. Alexander's army, engine of conquest. Nearly 40,000 men marched behind him. 9,000 Macedonian phalangites with their 18-foot sarissa spears. 3,000 hypastists, elite guard protecting the flanks. 7,000 Greek allied infantry and 5,000 mercenaries, battle-seasoned hoplites. Agrianian javelin throwers, unmatched in precision. Thracian and Illyrian skirmishers, light, deadly, unpredictable. 5,000 cavalry, including 1,800 companion horsemen, led by Philotas and Bucephalus, Alexander's legendary black warhorse. This was not just an army, it was a meticulously engineered storm. The Persian Empire, ancient, rich, and powerful. The Persian Empire was unlike anything Greece had ever faced. Satrapies, provinces ruled by governors, each commanding large forces. Vast lands and resources spanning continents. Ruled now by Darius III, the King of Kings. Many believed Alexander was marching toward defeat, but the young Macedonian king was unshaken. Strategy versus tradition. Memnon of Rhodes, a skilled Greek general in Persian service, advised them not to fight Alexander directly. Burn the land, starve him, retreat, and wait. Logical, wise. The Persian satraps refused. They couldn't bear to destroy their own lands. Pride over strategy. And so they waited for Alexander at the river Granicus. Alexander's vision. Before the first battle, Alexander addressed his generals. Our enemy believes their numbers are enough. They do not understand our spirit. We do not fight for survival. We fight for immortality. He had no intention of retreating or delaying. He would strike first, with speed, precision, and fury. Arrival at Asia Minor. Alexander advanced through the countryside. Some cities surrendered without a fight, hoping to avoid destruction, but other regions bolstered Persian resistance. The Macedonian army marched relentlessly, covering vast territories quickly. Alexander personally led scouting forces, often appearing to enemy outposts before they even heard he was near. He moved like lightning, he attacked like thunder. Clash at the river, prelude to Granicus. When the Persian army finally formed up at the banks of the river Granicus, Alexander saw something most commanders would fear. A deep river to cross, steep banks, 10,000 Persian cavalry ready to charge. His advisors urged caution. Wait until morning, cross slowly, do not risk it. Alexander looked at the waters and whispered, "Victory belongs to those who seize it, not those who await it." He ordered an immediate assault. A king who leads from the front. As his cavalry stepped into the river, they were bombarded with arrows and javelins. Horses stumbled, men fell, but still they advanced. And then, through the chaos, Alexander charged. He did not command from safety. He led into danger. The young king struck the Persian line like a bolt of lightning. As his cavalry clashed with the enemy, the phalanx descended behind him. Steel met flesh. Shields shattered. The river ran red. And Alexander, fighting amidst it all, turned the tide. Destiny set in motion. With that first brutal clash, the message was delivered not just to Persia, but to history. This was no ordinary invasion. This was the beginning of a conquest that would shake empires. A crossing that marked the dawn of a new era. And as the sun set over the blood-stained waters of the Granicus, the world began to whisper his name. Alexander the Great.
Flames at the Granicus, Alexander's first clash with empire. Victory does not begin with the battle. It begins with the decision to fight. Attributed to Alexander before Granicus. As dawn broke over the river Granicus, Alexander faced his first great trial against the Persian Empire. Before him lay a river swollen by spring rains, with steep, muddy banks, and thousands of Persian cavalry waiting to strike the moment his men touched the far shore. Most commanders would have waited, looked for another crossing, built pontoon bridges. Alexander did not wait. He attacked. The Persian line awaits. The Persians were ready, their 10,000 cavalry stretching across the eastern bank. Among them stood warriors from distant lands, Hyrcanians, Medes, and Bactrians, elite fighters from deep within the empire. They knew the terrain favored them. Behind them, in reserve, stood a force of Greek mercenary hoplites, well-trained, heavily armored, and cautious. Their commanders feared they might hesitate to fight against fellow Greeks under Alexander's banner. The strategy was simple. Wait for Alexander to cross, then crush him before his army could properly form. What they didn't expect was that he would charge mid-river, into the river of death. Alexander sent in a detachment first, companion cavalry, Ipaspists, and Paeonian scouts. But the Persians pushed them back. Then Alexander himself rode forward. The sun glinted off his bronze helmet with its white plumes. Shining like a beacon, he turned to his men and shouted, "Follow me! Those who seek glory, this is your moment!" The river surged around them as horses plunged through the water, arrows slicing through the air. Some cavalrymen were struck before they reached the far bank. But Alexander never slowed. He reached the eastern shore, amidst a storm of missiles, and charged headlong into the Persian ranks. The clash intensified instantly. Horses crashed chest to chest, spears shattered, men were dragged beneath the water or cut down on the banks. The river became a grave. Alexander led the royal squadron. At one point, surrounded by Persian nobles, he was targeted by Roesus, a towering cavalryman who swung his sword and struck Alexander's helmet, breaking off part of it. The blow would have killed him had his helmet not absorbed the impact. In reply, Alexander thrust his spear through Roesus's chest. Before he could turn, another warrior, Spithridates, raised his sword to strike Alexander from behind. At that instant, Cletus the Black, one of Alexander's most loyal commanders, intervened. He severed Spithridates' arm completely, saving Alexander's life. A single heartbeat, and the course of history remained intact. Turning the tide. By now, the Macedonian phalanx had crossed the river and was forming behind Alexander. The Persians, seeing only cavalry before, suddenly faced a wall of spears, 16 ranks deep. Their horses panicked. Cavalrymen fell. The Persian center collapsed. Those who could fled. Only the Greek mercenaries remained, and what happened next became one of the most brutal moments in Alexander's campaign. No mercy. The Greek hoplites, stranded in reserve, begged for negotiation. Alexander refused. "You chose Persian gold over Greek honor," he said coldly. "Now choose between defeat or death." There was no surrender. They were surrounded and cut down to the last. It was ruthless. It was decisive. And it sent a message that would echo across the empire. Aftermath of Granicus. In one stunning blow, Alexander had secured Asia Minor, destroyed the Persian cavalry resistance, eliminated thousands of mercenaries, proven himself as a commander worthy of legends. He suffered only light casualties, perhaps a few hundred, while Persian losses counted in the thousands. As the blood washed downriver, Alexander stood atop the bank, soaked in battle, his helmet fractured, his armor dented, and he looked east. "Asia is ours," he whispered. But conquest was not the same as victory. The Persian Empire was awakening. A war now truly begins. Word of the defeat at Granicus reached King Darius III, along with the names of commanders lost. Satraps prepared new armies. Diplomatic envoys attempted offers of peace. Alexander ignored them. He marched onward, from city to city, many surrendering instantly, others resisting and paying the price. He was unstoppable, but some believed he was reckless. The truth? He was both, and that made him dangerous.
Clash with the king, the Battle of Issus. Granicus was just the beginning. Now the true king would rise to defend his empire, and for the first time, Alexander would face Darius himself. 18 months had passed since Alexander stormed into Asia. The Persian Empire, shaken by the loss at Granicus, finally moved to strike back. At its head stood King Darius III, ruler of millions, master of the world's greatest empire, a man who believed no invading army could withstand his power. His forces numbered up to 100,000, drawn from every corner of Persia. Immortals, elite household troops, 10,000 strong. Cavalry from Syria, Armenia, and Central Asia. Greek mercenary hoplites, fierce warriors for hire. Archers and slingers from the eastern satrapies. Engineers, chariots, and war planners. Darius chose the plains of Issus, near modern-day Turkey, as his battleground. But geography betrayed him. Between the mountains and the sea, the battlefield narrowed to just 6 miles wide, perfect for Alexander, disastrous for Darius. The King of Kings had the numbers, but Alexander had the ground and the audacity to seize it. Between rock and sea, Alexander had marched south, seeking Persian forces in Syria, only to realize Darius had slipped behind him. The Macedonian army was now cut off from supplies and retreat. Any other commander would have tried to escape. Alexander turned his army around to face them head-on. The evening before battle, he visited his men, speaking directly, calling them by name, reminding them of their victories. That night, Alexander slept peacefully. Darius did not. Persian army formation. Right flank, C. Elite cavalry. Center, Greek mercenaries. Left flank, Persian infantry. Behind, Darius in his royal chariot, surrounded by immortals. Macedonian army formation. Left wing, Parmenian with Thessalonian cavalry. Center, Macedonian phalanx, 16 ranks deep. Right wing, mountainside, Alexander with companion cavalry, elite infantry, and Agrianes. Alexander looked toward the Persian ranks and said, "This is not a battle for land. This is a battle for empire." The charge. He signaled the attack. The companions galloped across the field, an unstoppable force of cavalry aiming straight for the Persian right. Darius's cavalry clashed with Alexander's, but the Macedonian charge hit like thunder. The fight was brutal. Horses crashed, men were thrown to the ground, yet Alexander pushed deeper. Crisis at the center. While Alexander advanced, the phalanx attempted to keep pace, but the terrain was uneven and their formation broke. The Greek mercenaries seized the opportunity, charging hard and driving the Macedonian center back. For the first time, Alexander's army was at risk of collapsing. A messenger rode to Alexander, "The center is faltering." Genius in the midst of chaos.
Without hesitation, Alexander wheeled his cavalry away from the right wing, pivoting like a knife blade into the Persian center. "To the heart!" he roared. The companions charged straight toward Darius himself. The Greek mercenaries, attacked on their flank, began to crumble. The phalanx regained momentum, and then it happened. The king breaks. As Alexander's cavalry closed in, Darius saw the young Macedonian king charging directly toward him through clouds of dust and blood. The King of Kings panicked. He turned his chariot and fled the battlefield. As news spread, panic followed. Persian lines collapsed. Soldiers threw down their weapons and ran. What followed was a slaughter. Aftermath of Issus. It was a catastrophic defeat for Persia. Darius escaped but lost. His mother, wife, and 3 children captured alive. Control of western Persian lands. His prestige as an emperor. Alexander, known for brutality in battle, showed remarkable restraint here. He treated the royal captives honorably, refusing to harm them. When offered several hundred talents of gold and even marriage to Darius's daughter in exchange for peace, Alexander declared, "Tell Darius, I do not bargain for half the empire. I am coming to take it all." A message to the world. Issus was more than a battle. It was a statement. The greatest empire on earth could be broken. And a 23-year-old king from Macedonia had just done it. From the shores of the Mediterranean to the halls of Persia, one name echoed through cities, temples, and palaces. Alexandros. Alexander the Great.
Siege of the seas, Tyre, Gaza, and the fall of Persian naval power. At Issus, Alexander broke the Persian army, but the empire still possessed one deadly advantage: its navy. To truly conquer Persia, Alexander would have to defeat not just armies, but the sea itself. After his stunning victory at Issus, Alexander faced a new challenge. The Persian fleet still controlled the eastern Mediterranean, threatening his supply lines and the very connection back to Greece. A direct naval battle would be risky. Persia held the advantage at sea. Alexander made a bold strategic decision. He would not defeat the navy with ships. He would defeat it by taking their ports, on land. By capturing key coastal cities, he would cut the Persians off from the sea entirely. His first targets? Miletus and Halicarnassus. Miletus and Halicarnassus, the opening siege. Miletus fell swiftly, but Halicarnassus, fortified and stubborn, put up fierce resistance. Walls stood strong, fires burned through the night, and Persian loyalists fought to the last. After brutal fighting, Alexander took the city. It was clear he would win by endurance as well as speed. But the strongest fortress was still ahead. A city unlike any other. A city on the sea. Tyre. Wave, the island fortress of Tyre. Tyre was a formidable challenge, located nearly half a mile offshore, surrounded by walls over 150 feet tall, protected by the Persian fleet. It was believed to be impregnable. The city refused to surrender. Alexander's reply? "I will reach your walls, even if I have to walk across the sea." And so he began to build a causeway, a massive stone bridge extending from the mainland toward Tyre, a feat no one had ever attempted. The siege began. At first, progress was steady, but the Tyrians launched fire ships, setting Alexander's siege towers ablaze. They attacked divers working underwater. They mocked him from their walls.
Many believed he would abandon the siege. Instead, Alexander grew more determined. He reinforced the causeway, brought in siege towers taller than Tyre's own walls, and surrounded the island using captured and allied ships. After 7 grueling months, the defenses finally broke. Storming of Tyre. The final assault struck like thunder. Macedonian siege towers launched missiles, archers rained arrows, then the walls gave way. Alexander led the charge. What followed was chaos. Tyre was taken by storm. Its defenders fought fiercely, but Alexander unleashed the fury of a king denied. Thousands were killed, over 30,000 captured and sold into slavery. It was brutal, devastating, and deeply symbolic. The strongest naval base in the region had fallen. Siege of Gaza, gateway to Egypt. Next came Gaza, high on a desert plateau. Unlike Tyre, Gaza could not be reached by sea. The walls were thick, and the defenders stubborn. 3 times Alexander was injured as he inspected the siege works. On the final assault, a catapult stone struck him in the shoulder, nearly killing him. He refused to step back. When kings bleed, soldiers fight harder. Gaza fell after a long siege. Its defenders died to the last. The road to Egypt lay open. Conquest of Egypt, from warlord to pharaoh. When Alexander entered Pelusium on the Nile Delta, the Persian satraps surrendered the entire province. Egypt had long suffered under Persian control. To them, Alexander was not a conqueror. He was a liberator. At Memphis, he was crowned Pharaoh of Egypt. At the mouth of the Nile, he founded Alexandria, destined to become one of the greatest cities in history. Then Alexander did something that would stir myths for millennia. He traveled deep into the desert, to the Oracle of Siwa. The oracle's whisper. According to ancient accounts, the priests greeted him as son of a moon, child of the gods. They told him his destiny was unmatched, that he would conquer the world. Alexander never revealed exactly what was spoken that day, but when he emerged from the temple, something had changed. He no longer marched merely as a king, but as a man who believed himself touched by divinity. A new Alexander emerges. With the naval threat destroyed, Egypt secured, and his own legend growing, Alexander turned his eyes back east, toward the heart of Persia, toward Darius, and toward a battle that would decide the fate of empires.
The Battle of Gaugamela, the day the world trembled. Granicus proved his courage, Issus proved his genius, but Gaugamela proved his destiny. It was the autumn of 331 BC. Alexander marched east, deeper into the belly of the Persian Empire. Behind him lay shattered cities, conquered lands, and the echoes of victories that shook the ancient world. Ahead of him waited Darius III, the great king, leading what was believed to be the largest army ever assembled in ancient history. Darius would not make the same mistake twice. He chose the battlefield himself, a vast plain near Gaugamela, close to modern-day Mosul in Iraq. He ordered the terrain cleared and flattened, removing rocks, leveling ground for one purpose: to unleash his scythed war chariots and overwhelm Alexander with massive cavalry charges. The stage was set for a clash so monumental that ancient historians would write, "The world held its breath that day." Armies face off. Persian forces estimated 50,000 to 100,000 plus. 200 scythed chariots, war elephants from India, elite cavalry from Bactria, Armenia, and Persia, the Immortals, the Royal Guard, Greek mercenary infantry, Azeri and Babylonian bowmen, Darius himself atop a golden chariot, Macedonian forces, approximately 47,000, the phalanx, 9,000 veterans with 18-foot ceresis, 3,000 hypaspestes, elite infantry, 1,800 companion cavalry led by Alexander, 7,000 Greek allied troops, trackers, archers, and javelin specialists, Thracian and Thessalian cavalry under Parmenion. Alexander was outnumbered nearly 2-1, but he had strategy, he had speed, he had will, and he had Bucephalus beneath him, calm before the storm. Dawn of the final confrontation. The night before battle, Darius ordered campfires lit across the plain, hoping to intimidate the Macedonians with sheer numbers. Alexander slept soundly. When asked how he could rest so easily, he replied, "I am not afraid of the men I will defeat tomorrow." His generals smiled. Alexander's masterstroke. At sunrise, Alexander inspected the battlefield. Seeing how Darius had spread his forces, he devised a brilliant tactic. He advanced diagonally to the right, drawing Persian cavalry away from the center to stretch their formation. Darius, fearing encirclement, reacted. He shifted his troops to prevent being flanked, and in doing so, he weakened his center. Alexander had set the trap. Battle ignites. The Persian chariots charged first. For a moment, the battlefield thundered with wheels tipped with blades. Then, Alexander's infantry opened their ranks, forming lanes. The chariots passed harmlessly through as Macedonian javelin throwers struck down the horses and crews. The moment they broke formation, Alexander shouted the order, "Companions, with me!" His cavalry surged like a lightning bolt. He aimed not at the flanks, he aimed not at the archers, but straight at Darius. The breaking of the king. The charge struck the Persian center like a hammer. Dust filled the air, horses collided. The Macedonian phalanx advanced behind him, piercing through chaos. Darius watched as Alexander, covered in blood and dust, rode towards him with a ferocity no king had ever shown. For the second time, the ruler of Persia turned and fled. When the king broke, his army followed. But victory came at a cost. On the left wing, where Parmenion commanded, the Persian cavalry nearly broke through. Reports reached Alexander. His general was surrounded and needed help. If the Persians crushed Parmenion, they could attack the Macedonian rear. Alexander faced a choice. Continue chasing Darius, ending the war, or risk losing his army? He chose his men. He wheeled his cavalry and charged back into the fray. The fighting was brutal. 60 of Alexander's elite companions fell. He personally led rescue efforts. Finally, the Persian resistance shattered. Aftermath of Gaugamela. The battle was over. The empire was broken. Macedonia suffered a few hundred casualties. Persian losses were in tens of thousands. Alexander rode through the battlefield, surrounded by silence. He gazed east. Now I am king of Asia. The road to Babylon. Days later, Alexander entered Babylon, the jewel of the empire, greeted as a liberator. At Susa, he sat upon the royal throne of Persia. He had done what no one thought possible. He did not take half the empire. He took it all.
The conqueror turns tyrant, power, paranoia, and betrayal. He conquered the world, but could not conquer himself. After the victory at Gaugamela, Alexander was no longer just king of Macedonia. He was king of Asia, ruler of the vast Persian Empire. Cities welcomed him as a liberator. Crowds hailed him as a living god. But as his power grew, so too did the shadows around him. He no longer led simply as a warrior king. He began to rule like a god. A new Alexander emerges. Alexander adopted Persian customs, royal robes, courtiers, and even the elaborate ceremonial rituals of Persia. He encouraged his men to marry local women, integrating cultures to solidify his rule. To Persians, this was wise and progressive. But to Macedonians and Greeks, it was betrayal. His soldiers had marched to defeat Persia, not to become Persian. He even entertained the ritual of proskynesis, bowing before the king, a gesture reserved only for the gods in Greek culture. When he proposed it, his generals were stunned. Only a god may receive such worship, the veteran commander Callisthenes argued. Alexander withdrew the demand, but he did not forget the resistance. The first blood. Tensions rose. Rivalries simmered beneath the surface. Alexander's growing belief in his divine destiny began to alienate even his closest companions. The first major incident was shocking. Philotas, commander of the companion cavalry and son of Alexander's most trusted general, Parmenion, was accused of ignoring an assassination plot. Whether guilty or not, he was tortured until he confessed. Then he was executed. Alexander sent killers to murder Parmenion, one of his oldest allies, before news could reach him. Trust was dead. Fear had taken its place. The banquet that changed everything. Not long after, during a drunken feast at Maracanda, modern-day Samarkand, tensions reached their peak. Cletus the Black, the very man who saved Alexander's life at the Battle of the Granicus, criticized him openly. "You owe your victories not to divine favor, but to the men who bled for you." Alexander, enraged and intoxicated, seized a spear in fury. Before anyone could intervene, he plunged it into Cletus, killing him instantly. Silence fell. Alexander stared at what he had done. His friend, his savior, dying on the ground. He collapsed, overcome with grief. For days, he refused food and water. But the stain could not be washed away. The king was changing. The historian falls. Soon after, Callisthenes, Alexander's official historian, the same man who resisted proskynesis, was accused of involvement in a conspiracy led by royal pages. The pages, young noblemen raised with Alexander, felt humiliated by him and plotted assassination. Under torture, names were given. Callisthenes was arrested. He was not put to death, but imprisoned. He died soon after, in chains. Those who opposed Alexander's vision vanished. A marriage for politics. Despite the bloodshed, Alexander continued his advance. In Bactria, amid harsh terrain and rebellions, he met Roxana, the daughter of a local noble. Her beauty captivated him. Their marriage was not only romantic, it was political. It helped bring peace to the region. To some, it showed compassion, but to others, it marked Alexander's transformation from conqueror to Eastern monarch. The price of immortality. Alexander's belief in his destiny had shifted from ambition to obsession. He no longer sought just victory. He sought divinity. He began speaking not of future wars, but of eternal legacy. He expected loyalty not just in action, but in thought. Those closest to him no longer walked beside him, they walked behind him. The man who won the world with the strength of comradeship was now losing himself to the isolation of greatness. The balance shifts. Yet despite the growing darkness, armies still followed him. Lands still fell before him. To the east lay India, the edge of the known world. Alexander turned towards it, towards immortality, towards the final chapter of his conquests. The world had given him everything. Now he would see just how much more it would cost.
He had conquered an empire stretching from Greece to Afghanistan. But the fire within him burned still. Alexander did not seek borders. He sought the edge of the world. In 327 BC, Alexander crossed the towering stretches of the Hindu Kush Mountains, pushing his exhausted army into lands no Greek had ever seen. His campaign into modern-day Pakistan and India would become the most brutal phase of his journey. Back home, many believed the war had already been won. Alexander disagreed. He believed his destiny lay where the known world ended and myth began. Into the unknown. 2 army columns descended into the Swat Valley, facing fierce resistance from local tribes like the Aspasians and Assassanians. The terrain was unforgiving. Rocky cliffs, narrow passes, sudden ambushes. Alexander led from the front, as always. When soldiers hesitated, Alexander was first through the breach. In Massaga, the local queen, known in legend as Cleophas, fought relentlessly. After days of combat, the city fell. Alexander reportedly took her as a lover. Their rumored son, though debated by historians, became a tale whispered across empires. The elephants of the Hydaspes clash with Porus. But nothing compared to what awaited next. At the banks of the Hydaspes River, modern-day Jhelum, stood King Porus, ruler of the Parava kingdom. He commanded an army unfamiliar to the Greeks. War elephants towering like moving fortresses, armored infantry and cavalry, strategic mastery of the terrain. The river flooded, water chest deep. Alexander waited for a stormy night and crossed upstream in silence. By dawn, Porus was taken by surprise. A battle like no other. The elephants charged like living mountains. They crushed men, hurled cavalry aside, and trampled formations. Arrows bounced off their thick hides. Horses panicked. The Macedonian phalanx wavered for the first time. Alexander used speed to outmaneuver Porus, sending cavalry to flank the elephants while his infantry held formation. The battle raged for hours in rain and blood. At last, Porus, wounded and surrounded, continued to fight atop his massive elephant, refusing to retreat. Alexander, impressed, sent envoys and asked, "How would you have me treat you?" "As a king would treat a king," Porus replied. Alexander smiled. He restored Porus's kingdom to him and even granted him additional lands. It was victory, but at great cost. This battle, historians say, was the bloodiest of Alexander's career. The mutiny at the Beas River. After Hydaspes, Alexander planned to march farther east, toward the Ganges, rumored to be guarded by armies even greater than those of Persia.
But at the Hyphasis, Bias River, his army refused. His men had marched more than 17,000 kilometers, fought countless battles, endured hunger, disease, and scorching heat. They heard stories of new massive kingdoms ahead. They could not go further. When Alexander ordered them onward, they stood still, silent, unmoving. For the first time in years, Alexander was disobeyed. His anger was volcanic, but even he saw it in their eyes. If he pushed further, the army would desert him or die. For 3 days he isolated himself in his tent. Then he emerged and announced the retreat. "I will take us home, not as conquerors defeated, but as men who reached the world's edge. Death comes for the king." On the retreat, Alexander sailed down the Indus, but resistance remained. During the siege of the Malian city, Alexander led the assault personally, scaling the walls first. He jumped into the city alone, followed by only a handful of men. An arrow struck him in the chest, puncturing his lung. He collapsed. His men, seeing their king fall, fought with unimaginable fury to reach him. They thought him dead. Rumors spread through the entire army. "Alexander has fallen." At last he was lifted out, bleeding heavily. For days he hovered near death. When he finally appeared before his troops again, pale, bandaged, but alive, he lifted his arm weakly. The army roared in relief. Many wept. He had nearly died, not from armies, but from his own relentless drive towards glory. The final test: march through the desert. Alexander sent part of his army back via the sea under Nearchus. He himself led the rest through the Gedrosian desert, modern-day Macron, one of the most brutal deserts on earth. Heat soared beyond endurance. Water vanished. Thousands died. Even Alexander suffered, but he refused to drink water offered him unless all his men could. The army continued forward, not because they had to, but because he did. He had seen the edge of the world and looked beyond it. But there was one final journey still left: the march home.
He had conquered the world, but he could not conquer time. In June 323 BC, Alexander the Great, undefeated in battle, ruler of an empire stretching from Greece to India, returned to Babylon, the heart of the Persian Empire. Only 32, he still spoke not of peace, but of new conquests: Arabia, Carthage, even Rome. Yet destiny had other plans. Just months earlier, he had lost Hephaestion, his closest friend, and perhaps the only person he truly loved, to fever. Shattered with grief, Alexander lay beside his body, refusing food and sleep, cutting his hair in mourning like Achilles for Patroclus, and ordering the sacred fires of the empire extinguished. It marked the beginning of his unraveling. After a final banquet on May 29th, he too fell ill. Over 11 days his strength faded, though he still issued military commands. When asked who should succeed him, he whispered, "To the strongest." No heir was appointed. As news spread of his decline, thousands of loyal soldiers silently passed his bedside. He could no longer speak, but lifted his hand in farewell. They did not lose their king in battle. They watched him fade into legend. On June 10th or 11th, 323 BC, Alexander died, undefeated, unmatched, unforgettable. His only heir was unborn, carried by Roxana. With no clear succession, his empire fractured as his generals, the Diadochi, fought for control. Roxana and her son, Alexander IV, were later murdered, as was his wife Statira. His body, intended for Macedonia, was seized by Ptolemy and taken to Alexandria, sealed in a golden sarcophagus, and then lost to history. His tomb has never been found, one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world. Yet while his empire broke, his influence endured.
His death ignited the Hellenistic Age, spreading Greek ideas across Asia and the Middle East, shaping philosophy, science, mathematics, astronomy, art, and culture in ways never seen before. Cities he founded, including Alexandria, Herat, and Kandahar, became lasting centers of knowledge and trade. He conquered land, but what he truly left behind was change. In 13 years of conquest and 20 major battles, he was never defeated. He believed himself divine, and history made him so. Even Julius Caesar wept before his statue, lamenting, "At my age, Alexander had conquered the world, and I have done nothing." Some men rule for a lifetime. Alexander ruled for eternity. Some seek glory. He became glory. He died at 32, but his shadow stretches across millennia. Was he a hero or a tyrant? A visionary or a destroyer? Or simply the greatest general in history?
And so, we reach the end of an extraordinary journey, the rise and fall of a man who changed the course of history. Alexander the Great did in 13 years what most empires couldn't achieve in centuries. He conquered lands, commanded loyalty, and shaped cultures. Yet in the end, he could not escape mortality. At just 32, he was gone. But his influence lived on, through the cities he founded, the ideas he spread, and the legacy that shaped the ancient world and continues to echo through time. As you've seen, greatness always comes at a cost. Alexander's ambition built an empire, but also unleashed chaos after his death. His victories were celebrated, his leadership admired, but his final moments remind us that even legends are human. If this documentary gave you a deeper insight into ancient civilizations, military strategy, and the extraordinary mind of Alexander, make sure to hit the subscribe button now and turn on the bell icon so you never miss another powerful historical exploration. I'm bringing you more informative videos, deep dives into lost empires, ancient warfare, and untold stories that shaped humanity. If you enjoyed this video, share your thoughts in the comments. Was Alexander the Great a visionary leader or a ruthless conqueror? I'd love to hear your opinion. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you want more documentaries like this. Thank you for watching. This is History Brought to Life. Until the next video, stay curious, stay informed.